Casual, and today we are going to put a conclusion into the 2024 free agency off-season portion with a little recap from every team. So let's quickly get right into it. So first we have the Buffalo Bills. So their notable additions, they just recently signed Curtis Samuel to a 3-year, $30 million deal. They extended Deion Dawkins, AJ Epineza, David Edwards, Daquan Jones. They made a lot of re-signings. They didn't really make too many notable additions. They also re-signed Mitch Trubisky, if you care. Now, they did lose a lot of guys. I like the Curtis Samuel pickup. I think that's their best addition they made, and then overall best move I'll probably give, I guess, to extending guys like Dawkins and Epineza. But I think overall I'll give their off season or their free agency period, because we still have the draft. I'll give it a B for Buffalo Bills, I guess. Then we get the Miami Dolphins. They signed guys like Jonnu Smith, Jordan Brooks. I really like that pickup. Shaq Barrett. Now they did lose guys like Xavier Howard, Christian Wilkins. The pickups of Shaq Barrett, Jordan Brooks, Anthony Walker, Kendall Fuller, and Jordan Poyer are nice pickups. I'll give them a B+. They also lost Robert Hunt as well. I'll give the Miami Dolphins a B+. I think they made some good pickups to replace the guys they cut. They didn't really sign anybody to any massive extensions. Like, the biggest yearly salary they gave out was Jordan Brooks, 3-year, $30 million, and I like that pickup. So yeah, I'll give the Dolphins a B+. And then the Patriots, they extended Kendrick Bourne, Jalen Reagor, Hunter Henry. They picked up Antonio Gibson. Of course, we know they traded Mac Jones. I like that move for them. They also re-signed Josh Uche on a steal of a contract. They didn't do too much, though. Their team hasn't really changed. So I'll just give them a C+, just because nothing really happened. They just brought guys back, signed some decent free agents. They also brought back guys like Mike Onwenu. I'll give them a B- because of the re-signing of Onwenu and Uche. Lastly, for the AFC East, we have the Jets. They traded for Morgan Moses and signed Tyron Smith. Those were their big moves. I really like the Tyron Smith pickup. Aaron Rodgers got injured. Now, it wasn't because of the O-line, but you got to be careful with Aaron Rodgers. You got to protect him. So I really like that pickup for the Jets. He is old, but so is a lot of the players on the Jets, especially their quarterback. So I'll give a lot of B grades here for the AFC East, but I'll give them a B- as well. So I think my favorite offseason for the AFC East would probably be the Bills, and then I guess the Dolphins would be second for me. Moving on to the AFC North. First up, the Ravens. Amazing offseason. They bring back Justin Madubuike, and they signed Derrick Henry, creating one of the best backfields in the NFL. If not the best, I'm going to give the Ravens I'm going to give them an A grade for the offseason. Simply because of Derrick Henry and Madubuike, but they also extended guys like Aguilar, Brett Urban, and Malik Harrison. Then we move on to the Bengals. They obviously got rid of Joe Mixon, but they signed Von Bell back. He left for the Panthers, and he came back. They got a really good, solid tight end in Mike Gesicki. Who knows what they're going to do with T. Higgins? We'll have to cover that another day. They also brought in Geno Stone. I think had the most interceptions amongst safeties. And they made some key re-signings as well. I'm going to give the Bengals an A grade as well. We'll see what happens with T. Higgins. That could alter the grade. But if T. Higgins is willing to play on the franchise tag, which it seems like he's absolutely not, if they can keep T. Higgins around, then maybe it gets an A+, but I'm just going to give it an A. Mainly, the only reason stopping it from an A+ is the uncertainty with T. Higgins. Then we get the Cleveland Browns. They traded for Jerry Jeudy, a trade I liked because you didn't give up anything, really. They made some good re-signings: Darius Smith, Adam Troutman, Shelby Harris, Maurice Hurst, and they also signed two decent, okay linebackers in Devin Bush and Jordan Hicks, as well as they signed Jameis Winston. You can't hate on Jameis Winston signing. I'll give them a B minus. Didn't do too much. They traded for Jerry Jeudy, which is cool, but nothing too spectacular for me. Then we get the Steelers. They, of course, signed Russell Wilson. They signed Patrick Queen, which I loved. They did trade Deontay Johnson away for Dante Jackson, which the Panthers are going to cut anyway, so I don't know if I love getting rid of Deontay for Dante Jackson. But they did need a corner, so I don't hate it. And they obviously also signed Deshaun Elliott. And before I clicked record on this video, the Steelers traded for Justin Fields. That trade finally happened. I like that. I like what they've done with the quarterback room overall. You get Russell Wilson on a dirt cheap contract 1 year. If he doesn't work out, it's fine. And especially if he doesn't work out mid-season, you can just throw Justin Fields in there, which you only gave a 6th-round pick for. Potentially a 4th if he plays enough, I believe. But I really like the trade for Justin Fields. As long as they don't get in the situation of they pay him because they think he can be good and then he doesn't work out. If they can avoid that, I really like the pickup of Fields. I love the pickup of Patrick Queen, Deshaun Elliott. I don't hate the trade for Dante Jackson, so I'll give the Steelers a B+, maybe an A- for their offseason. So I guess my favorite offseason for the AFC North would be the Ravens and the Bengals. I think I gave them both an A, I believe so. Moving on to the AFC South, we have the Texans. They first traded for Joe Mixon, then extended him. I'm not exactly sure on the money, but they trade for a really good running back. They re-sign Schultz and Noah Brown. They get some great defensive pickups in Danico Autry, Daniil Hunter, Azeez Al-Shaair. They take a chance on a guy like Jeff Okudah on a cheap contract. The Texans wanted to get a running back. They got one in Joe Mixon. They wanted to solidify defense. They lost Grenard, but they got Hunter. They got a great linebacker in Azeez Al-Shaair. A really solid D lineman in Danico Autry. And they brought back their other key offensive pieces that were free agents. And they also brought Kayami Fairbairn back. So I'll give the Texans offseason an A- for me personally. And they also signed Tommy Townsend because I believe Ariza is the new Chiefs punter. Then we move on to the Colts. Of course, they signed Joe Flacco. I like that. Good veteran backup for Anthony Richardson. We obviously hope Anthony Richardson stays healthy, but if not, you have another serviceable quarterback. They had Minshew last year, now they get Joe Flacco, but obviously we want Anthony Richardson to play. They bring Michael Pittman back. The Colts offseason was just all about re-signing Kenny Moore, Zaire Franklin, Grover Stewart, Tyquan Lewis, Michael Pittman, all re-signed. And they picked up, I guess their biggest pickup was Joe Flacco and Roquan Davis. So I'm going to give this one an A- just because they didn't spend a ton of money on the guys they re-signed. And they were guys that they should have brought back. They had a great year with Gardner Minshew. So if Richardson can and hopefully stay healthy, the Colts can be a very good team as they just brought their whole team back. Jonathan Taylor's healthy. We'll see what they do in the draft. So I like this free agency for the Colts. Nothing splash. They didn't make any splash move that added a new player to the team, really. But they brought their guys back. They got a good quality veteran. Maybe I'll give it a B+ for the Colts. Then we move to the Jags. Now the Jags offseason, I don't know how big of a fan of I am. I think I was early on, but I'm not sure. I'm kind of in the middle. So obviously they trade for Mac Jones. I don't really understand that. As long as they don't pay him to a contract to be a backup, it doesn't move me really, that trade. They signed Gabe Davis. I like Gabe Davis, especially if you lose Calvin Ridley. He's a quality receiver. They signed Ezra Cleveland, a good young guard. They get a veteran in Mitch Morse. They get Eric Armstead, Ronald Darby, and Darnell Savage, as well as that I franchise tag Josh Allen. We'll have to see what happens with that. But it seems like they seem like they might have spent money to spend money. We'll see how the pieces fit. I like Savage in Cleveland. Gabe Davis, we'll have to see, for me at least. I'll give their offseason a B. Nothing that blew me away, but nothing that I was like super confused at why they did it. So I'll just give that a B grade. Now the Titans offseason I liked. They bring in Kenneth Murray. They get an amazing center in Lloyd Cushenberry. They may have overpaid on Calvin Ridley, but he's still a good receiver. He's a little older, but he's still a good receiver to help out Will Levis. They get Tony Pollard and also Chidobe Awuzie. They had their positions of need. They needed a center. They needed a receiver, a running back to replace Henry, a corner, a linebacker, and they got quality guys at that position. Some younger building block type guys like Cushenberry, and then some older guys like Ridley. I think Awuzie may be a little older. I don't know exactly his age. Kenneth Murray's a younger guy, but he's trying to figure it out still. He was a higher pick. So I'll give the Titans an A-. So my favorite for the AFC South would probably be the Texans. I really liked what they did. Then to the AFC West, the Broncos didn't really do much. I mean, can't be mad at them re-signing little Jordan Humphrey. But they didn't really do much, so I'll just give them a C+. Chiefs, I think, had a great offseason. They bring Chris Jones back, which they needed to do, and they did that. Now, they brought Drew Tranquill back. I don't know if Willie Gay signed with the Saints, I think. So they lost him, but they get Drew Tranquill back. And they did tag L'Jarius Sneed. Now, it was all rumored that he was going to get traded. Then there was rumors that he was going to stay and play on the franchise tag. But then teams, I think, like the Titans and Colts have that him going there has gained traction. So we'll see what they do with Sneed. But they have amazing young corners anyway. But then they signed Marquise Hollywood Brown on a 1-year, only $11 million contract. A very good, young, deep route runner. Similar play style and archetype to Tyreek Hill. Obviously, he's not as good as Tyreek Hill, but similar play style. He can fill the role that Tyreek Hill left. Maybe not as well, but he can still do what Tyreek did to some extent. Great signing. I'll give the Chiefs an A for me. Not quite an A+, just because we have to see what happens with L'Jarius Sneed. Who knows what they can get in return for him. But I'll give it an A. Now the Raiders, I might give the Raiders an A+. They didn't do much, but they got Christian Wilkins. They have him, Max Crosby. I'll give it an A because they didn't do too much. They got Gardner Minshew. They gave him a lot of money. Now, I think they should stick with Aiden O'Connell, in my opinion. But we'll see what happens at the quarterback. They get, like I mentioned, Christian Wilkins. I'll give the Raiders an A. Chargers, I'll probably have to give the Chargers a C. Maybe a C-. They lose Mike Williams. They lose Austin Eckler. They traded away Keenan Allen for nothing. We'll get to that with the Bears. And their big signings were Gus Edwards and 2 tight ends. They signed Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst. I'm going to give the Chargers a C-. They didn't really do much but lose players. And they made 3 decent signings. We'll say 4 decently major signings. And 2 of them were tight ends. So I'm not a fan of the Chargers offseason. I'd say Chiefs and Raiders were my AFC West winners. Now the Cowboys, we all know the Cowboys did absolutely nothing in free agency. They signed Eric Kendricks, which is, that's a to be determined signing. I'll give the Cowboys a C versus the Chargers C-, because the Chargers didn't really add anybody, but they also lost a ton of people. The Cowboys just really lost. I guess the Cowboys lost Tyron Smith and Tony Pollard, and they just cut Michael Gallup and Van Der Esch. So I'll give the Cowboys a C- as well. Moving on to the Giants. I really like the Giants offseason. They get a guy like Jalen Mills, get 2 quality linemen in Illuminor and Runyon, get a serviceable quality running back in Singletary, and obviously the big trade for Brian Burns. I'm going to give the Giants a B+, but it does not compete with the offseason that the Philadelphia Eagles had. They get Bryce Huff on a great contract. Really like Bryce Huff. They bring C.J. Gardner-Johnson back. Really like that pickup. They get Devin White, who I still think has potential to be really good. They bring back Landon Dickerson. Now, the Kenny Pickett trade is interesting, but they didn't really give up. They gave up a third, but I guess they got a fourth in return, so that's kind of a whatever trade. And then, of course, the big signing is Saquon Barkley, creating, just like Lamar and Henry, an incredible backfield, potentially the best in the league, with Jalen Hurts and Saquon. They brought back the guys they needed to bring back, because the guys they lost wasn't their fault. Kelsey retired, and so did Brandon Graham. No, not Brandon Graham. Fletcher Cox. They re-signed Brandon Graham. So the guys they lost were out of their control. They brought everyone else back, and they added Saquon, Bryce Huff, Devin White, and C.J. Gardner-Johnson. The Eagles are going to be my first A+ grade of the offseason. I love what they did. Now the Commanders. Everyone's wondering what the Commanders were doing. They had all this money. Did they spend it on just mediocre players that were really good 4 years ago, and now they're not so good anymore? They get Austin Eckler. He definitely is not as good as he once was, but they didn't give him like anything. They gave him like $6 million a year. So like they didn't spend that much money on him. They didn't give him a Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs contract. So I don't hate the signing. Zach Ertz again, only $5 million. Nick Allegretti, I like that pickup. Same with the Biada's pickup. Dorrance Armstrong's a pretty good edge rusher. Frankie Louvu, obviously a really good linebacker. Can kind of do a lot there. Speaking of do a lot, Jeremy Chin, he's not a bad safety pickup. Like, take a chance on him because he can do a lot if used correctly. And if one guy can do it, Dan Quinn. And then they signed Bobby Wagner, but Zach Ertz is a 1-year deal. Chin's a 1-year deal. Bobby Wagner's a 1-year deal. Cleveland Farrell's they signed a lot of 1-year deals. Austin Eckler's only a 2-year deal. So if these contracts don't work out, it may not hurt them that much. Now, they may have spent money just to spend money, but I think people are over-hating this, the Commanders offseason. Obviously, I still don't love it, but I'll give it like a B+. I'll give the Commanders a B+ offseason. I've also heard good things about it too, but I've also heard some, like, they've just spent money to spend money. Now moving on to the Bears, I think the Bears had a great offseason. Now, the pick of DeAndre Swift, I'm not a big fan of. I've mentioned this before, just like Miles Sanders. Sanders had a great year with the Eagles O-line, got paid a lot of money by the Panthers, and didn't do that much. I'm afraid it could potentially happen with Swift. Now, I'm not saying Swift's a bad player, but I think him being on the Eagles could have made the Bears spend a little more money than maybe they should have. And they gave him a 3-year deal, so he's kind of locked up for a decent amount of time. And if he doesn't produce like he did on the Eagles O-line, which he probably won't because the Bears O-line, albeit it's not bad, it's obviously not as good as the Eagles O-line. So I wasn't the biggest fan of giving DeAndre Swift a long-term deal worth that much money, but we'll see how it works out. Now, every other move, I am a big fan of. Kevin Byard, yes, he may have regressed a decent amount. It's not that massive of a contract. I don't hate the Kevin Byard signing. Plus, they have a lot of young talented defensive backs, and they could learn something from Kevin Byard. One of those being Jalen Johnson, who probably doesn't need to learn anything because he's already really good. But they bring him back. Jonathan Owens is a decent safety. They signed Gerald Everett, a really solid tight end. They pull off an incredible trade, in my opinion, for Keenan Allen, only giving up a 4th-round pick. And again, as I just recently found out that the Bears have traded Justin Fields to Pittsburgh, you now officially made your decision. You are taking Caleb Williams. You get Caleb Williams, Swift, Kmet, Everett, Moore, Keenan Allen. He's in one of the best positions a first overall pick may ever be in. So I really like the Bears offseason. I'm going to give them an A. Not quite an A+, but I'll give them an A. Then we get the Lions. Now, the Lions for a long time didn't really do much outside of trading for Carlton Davis. I really like the trade for Carlton Davis. But recently they signed DJ Reader, and they also re-signed Donovan Peoples-Jones, which is a solid re-sign. Make that trade not completely, make the trade somewhat worth it. But the big signing they did was sign DJ Reader, which I really like. You now have him, Hutchinson, I believe McNeil, who I think had a really good underrated season. And on top of that, you get Carlton Davis and Amik Robinson, 2 underrated corners in my opinion. I really like the Lions offseason. I'll give them an A- for me. Then we move on to the Packers. Now, they got rid of Aaron Jones and substituted him with Josh Jacobs. They did give him a lot of money. We'll see how Jacobs does. I like Jacobs, but we'll see how he plays on Green Bay, especially without Bakhtiari. But they still re-signed A.J. Dillon. We don't know the money yet, so we'll see what that is. Interesting that he wanted to come back. And if I'm A.J. Dillon, I personally don't want to play behind a running back like Josh Jacobs that they paid 4 years, $48 million, because they're probably going to be committed to him. That's just me, but I don't hate it from the Packers' perspective. And then they also get Xavier McKinney, who I really like, young safety. Giants didn't want him, so they give him a 4-year deal. I'll give the Packers a B+. And then finally, for the NFC North, we got the Vikings. Now, of course, they lost Kirk Cousins, and they replaced him with Sam Darnold. However, hear me out. They have Justin Jefferson. They brought in Aaron Jones. They still have Ty Chandler. Now, I like Ty Chandler mainly because of fantasy, but I still think he's a good running back. Obviously, they mainly have Aaron Jones. They have Jordan Addison. They had T.J. Hawkinson. The O-line isn't terrible. If there is a situation that Sam Darnold can succeed in and become a pretty solid quarterback, maybe do a Geno Smith type thing, it would be this Minnesota Vikings team, as long as they don't trade Jefferson, which it doesn't seem like they were doing, but it also seemed like they would trade him to the Bengals, but who knows. If they can keep Jefferson, this is a great situation for Darnold, and it's only a 1-year deal, so if he still is Sam Darnold, you either draft a quarterback this year, bench Sam Darnold, or start that quarterback next year, or you go after a quarterback the following offseason, or you just draft a quarterback and then just start him over Darnold. And if Darnold doesn't do anything for you, you let him go next year. It's only $8 million guaranteed for a quarterback. That's not bad. And they also added Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel. Grenard, obviously, a really good edge rusher. Van Ginkel, a solid linebacker. I like the Vikings offseason. I'm going to give them a A-. Favorite offseason has to be the Bears from the NFC North. Moving on to the NFC South, we first have the Falcons, another great offseason. They bring in Kirk Cousins. Yes, it's a lot of money, but it's also Kirk Cousins who was playing amazing football before he get injured. So as long as that injury isn't too detrimental, great signing. They pick up Darnell Mooney. I really like Darnell Mooney. Now, it may have been an overpay, but sometimes you just got to pay to get good players. Darnell Mooney's a good receiver, and he doesn't have to be the number one like he was for a few years in Chicago. He gets to be the number 2. Not only is he the number 2 receiver, but he's like the number 4 option in general behind Bijan, Pitts, and London. And then they also were able to flip Desmond Ridder for Rondell Moore. In my opinion, that's an absolute win of a trade for the Falcons. Desmond Ridder wasn't going to do anything really with Kirk Cousins. They said they wanted to trade him, I believe. And you get Rondell Moore. That is a great trade if you're the Falcons. So now you have London, Mooney, and Moore. That's a very solid, serviceable receiver core, especially with Pitts and Bijan and Kirk at quarterback. So I'm going to give the Falcons an A for their offseason. Then we get to the Panthers. So obviously they traded away Brian Burns, and we're not going to talk about what they passed on earlier because this is just this offseason. Second round pick isn't horrible. You would have loved the first, but at least it's a high second. But we're going to mainly talk about what they got in free agency. They signed 2 guards. First, Robert Hunt. Yes, it may be an overpay. However, when you win 2 games, you need to overpay. They want to protect their rookie quarterback after he got pummeled all of last season. So I don't hate spending a little more money than maybe you needed to. You get Robert Hunt. You also get Damian Lewis. You shore up that interior O-line. And not only did Bryce need time to throw the ball, he also needed people to throw the ball and people to get open. And when talking about getting open, Deontay Johnson's one of the best at just getting open. So I love being able to get Deontay Johnson for a corner in Dante Jackson that they were going to cut anyway. They also signed Ashawn Robinson, a decent D-tackle, DJ Wanham, a younger, solid edge who could turn out to be much better. They get a serviceable linebacker, Josie Jewell. Dane Jackson's a good corner. And Jordan Fuller. I really like the Jordan Fuller pickup. It was only 1 year, but I like, because I think they got rid of Von Bell, so I like the addition of Jordan Fuller. As a Panther fan, and as unbiased as possible, I'll give this a B+. I think that's fair. Then we get to the Saints, another team who didn't really do anything. I think they cut Michael Thomas. We'll see what happens with Marshawn Lattimore. There's rumors he might get traded. They bring in Willie Gay. They didn't do anything really to deserve a bad grade or a good grade because they are struggling with money. So it's kind of hard. So with the resources they had, I'll give them a B- because Willie Gay is a solid young linebacker that still, I believe, has potential. Then we get to the Buccaneers. They bring Baker Mayfield back. You needed to do that. Great re-signing. Levante David's a good re-sign. They obviously paid Mike Evans. And then their big addition, they also tagged Winfield. We'll see what happens there. But their big addition was bringing Jordan Whitehead back and Bryce Hall. 2 quality secondary corners and safeties. I'll give the Bucs a B+ as well. Again, their main focus was on Baker, Mike Evans. So they were kind of limited to the money they could spend on other players. But Bryce Hall and Whitehead are good signings. So I'll give them a B+. And obviously my favorite offseason of the NFC South was the Atlanta Falcons. Then I believe the last division we have is the NFC West. First, the Cardinals. I don't really know how to feel about the Cardinals offseason. They signed Bilal Nichols, Sean Murphy-Bunting. I like that pickup. But they traded away Rondell Moore for Desmond Ridder. They have Kyler Murray, who's now finally healthy for a full season. They also lost Hollywood Brown. Now, I think that was going to happen anyway. But you lose Hollywood Brown, you lose Rondell Moore, and you get Desmond Ridder. I don't like the Cardinals offseason. I'm going to give them a C. C for Cardinals. There you go. Then we get the Rams. The Rams, they paid Jimmy G only a 1-year deal. He's a good backup. I don't want Jimmy G starting, but if he's a backup quarterback, I'm not upset, especially on a 1-year deal. They re-signed Kevin Dotson. But their big pickups were Darius Williams, Jonah Jackson, and Cameron Curl. Cameron Curl's a steal at 2 years, $13 million. Darius Williams He is on the older side, so maybe a 3-year, $22.5 million deal is a little expensive, but I still really like Darius Williams. Jonah Jackson's a great guard. I like the Rams offseason. I didn't think the Rams had this much money. Now, they did lose Aaron Donald to retirement, so we'll see how they can fill that hole, because obviously you can't replace Aaron Donald, but what can they do to fix the hole left by Aaron Donald? We will see. But with what they've done now, because obviously they didn't know Aaron Donald's about to retire, I'll give them an A-. Then we get the Niners. Again, a team that doesn't really have much money. They signed Leonard Floyd. They signed Yetur Gross-Matos, two quality edge rushers. Devondre Campbell's a good linebacker. I like that pickup. But again, they just don't have money. We'll see what happens with Ayuk. Deebo Samuel, I think, has been mentioned in trades. But for a team that didn't have much money, you can't really give them a grade. So I'll just give them a C, because they didn't do too much. Because they weren't really able to do too much. Last team on here is the Seahawks. Now, they traded for Sam Howell, which surprised me, because I was definitely thinking they might draft a quarterback. Now, they still might, but I thought, a guy like Penix or Bo Nix would have been perfect for Seattle to sit behind Geno. But maybe Sam Howell's going to be that guy. They only gave up a 4th and 6, so if it doesn't work out, no, they gave up a 3rd, excuse me. But they got a 4th in return, so if it doesn't work out, they didn't trade much. They bring back Noah Fant, Leonard Williams. I really like the fact that they were able to bring back Leonard Williams, because it made the trade actually seem worth it. If you give up a 2nd-round pick for a half a season rental when you don't really do much in the playoffs, it's not really worth it, but they were able to bring him back. And then they also got Jerome Baker, Jerome Baker on a 1-year, $7 million deal, personally, I think is a great pickup. And then Rayshon Jenkins is not a bad safety pickup as well. So I'll give the Seahawks a B+. My favorite would definitely be the Rams, but Cardinals I didn't like at all. Niners didn't really do anything because they couldn't. Seahawks wasn't bad. And then the Rams actually had a pretty decent offseason, in my opinion. And that'll conclude my 2024 free agency recap. It was a crazy free agency, but now it's the draft time, draft season. We'll do a couple more mock drafts before the draft actually happens. So let me know in the comments how you thought your team did this offseason. Do you like the moves they made? Let me know. Let me know your opinions on my opinions. Make sure you like the video, subscribe, and turn that notification bell, please. You don't want to miss more amazing content over here at Couch Casual. And that'll do it for me. Peace.